Access denied. Marcus Chen's hands trembled as he swiped his security card for the fourth time. The cruel red light seemed to mock him, like a digital executioner delivering its final verdict. Behind him, a procession of the Walking Dead, 40 confused employees clutching cardboard boxes, their careers reduced to desk trinkets and family photos. 12 years. 12 years of perfect attendance, flawless reports, and unwavering loyalty to Hartwell Industries. Yesterday, Marcus was planning his daughter's college fund. Today, he was persona non grata, locked out of his own life. The security guard approached with the awkward shuffle of a man delivering bad news. "Sir, I need you to step aside. Your access has been revoked." Sarah from HR sobbed quietly into her phone, trying to explain the unexplainable to her husband. Tom from IT stared at his company laptop as if willing it to spring back to life and announced this was all some elaborate corporate prank. But this was no joke. This was the handiwork of Ethan Hartwell, the golden boy who'd strutted into their lives 3 weeks ago with his Harvard MBA and daddy's blessing. He'd promised optimization and delivered devastation, firing nearly half the workforce without understanding what a single one of them actually did. What none of them knew was that Marcus had spent his final hour in the office doing more than packing family photos. His fingers had danced across his keyboard one last time, downloading files that would soon prove invaluable. Years of financial records, client communications, and system passwords, all stored on a tiny USB drive now burning a hole in his pocket. The security cameras had captured everything, but nobody was watching. Nobody except Helen Rodriguez, who sat in her office 3 floors up, making careful notes about which employees had been terminated and which files they might have accessed before their final logout. Ethan Hartwell thought he was a genius. He had no idea he'd just awakened a sleeping dragon. The emergency board meeting felt like a funeral, appropriate, since it marked the death of an era. Old Robert Hartwell, 78 and fading fast, finally admitted defeat. His heart was failing, his energy gone, and his empire needed new blood. "My son Ethan will be taking over as CEO, effective immediately." The words hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. The boardroom filled with executives who'd built this company from nothing into a billion-dollar juggernaut, all wearing the same expression, polite horror. Ethan rose like a conquering hero, all sharp suits and sharper ambition. He radiated the dangerous confidence of someone who'd never truly failed at anything. "I know there's concern about my lack of hands-on experience," Ethan said, his smile never wavering. "But I've spent 2 years at McKinsey, and I can see exactly where this company bleeds money." Helen Rodriguez, the Iron Lady who'd shepherded operations for 22 years, felt her stomach clench. She'd survived 3 recessions, 2 expansions, and countless crises. Her voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "Ethan, our workforce isn't just an expense line. These people have knowledge that took decades to build." "That's exactly the outdated thinking holding us back," Ethan replied with the casual cruelty of youth. "Everything can be automated or outsourced. We don't need 40 accountants when software can handle 35. What Ethan didn't mention was his real motivation. His girlfriend Ashley had expensive tastes, and his trust fund wouldn't kick in for another 2 years. The board's quarterly bonuses were tied to profit margins, and nothing boosted profits like slashing payroll. He'd already picked out the Porsche he'd buy with his first CEO bonus. Before we dive deeper, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments, do you think employees' loyalty matters more than profit margins? Or was Ethan right that only numbers count? Old Robert looked like a ghost of himself. "Just be careful, son. These people have families." "Dad, sentiment doesn't pay the bills. Numbers don't lie." But some numbers, as Ethan was about to discover, carried secrets that could kill. Board member Catherine Wells shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She'd been Robert's confidant for decades and knew about certain arrangements that Ethan might not appreciate. After the meeting, she approached Helen with a cryptic warning that would prove prophetic. "Some secrets are buried for good reason. Make sure the boy doesn't dig too deep." The Hartwell Industries building at 9 p.m. felt like a mausoleum. Helen Rodriguez sat alone in her office, surrounded by the phantom presence of fired colleagues. Computer screens flickered with error messages that would have taken Marcus Chun 5 minutes to fix. Marcus, the man who understood their financial systems better than anyone, now banished to the unemployment line. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter. "Mom, saw the news about layoffs. You okay?" Helen stared at the message, crafting a lie with practiced ease. "I'm fine, baby. Don't worry." But nothing was fine. The company was hemorrhaging expertise from every department while Ethan remained blissfully oblivious to the carnage. Helen opened her desk drawer and retrieved a file marked confidential, HR eyes only, Robert's insurance policy from years past, when he'd understood that loyalty flowed both ways. She wasn't the only one working late. 3 floors down, night janitor Miguel Santos was making his rounds when he noticed something odd. Ethan's office light was still on, but the young CEO wasn't inside. Instead, someone was rifling through his desk drawers with practiced efficiency. Miguel recognized the intruder immediately. James Winters, Hartwell's former head of legal who'd been fired just yesterday. Winters was photographing documents with his phone, his face grim with purpose. When he spotted Miguel watching, both men froze. After a tense moment, Winters approached the janitor with an envelope thick with cash. "You didn't see me here, Miguel. But if anyone asks about strange visitors tonight, you might mention seeing Peterson Group's people leaving around this time." Miguel pocketed the money and nodded. He'd worked for Hartwell Industries for 15 years and had his own reasons to dislike the new boss. Sometimes the best revenge comes from simply looking the other way. Helen dialed Marcus's number. Her voice cut through the late-night silence like a blade. "We need to talk. Rosario's Diner, 1 hour." The real game was about to begin. Rosario's Diner squatted on 5th Street like a forgotten relic, its neon sign casting sickly shadows through grimy windows. Helen sat in the corner booth, stirring cold coffee and looking every one of her years. Marcus slid across from her, exhaustion written in every line of his face. "If this is about getting my job back, it's not." Helen's eyes held a darkness Marcus had never seen before. "Marcus, in 12 years of handling the Peterson Group, did you ever wonder why they only worked with us?" The question hit him like ice water. Peterson Group was their golden goose, 30% of their annual revenue. They valued our reliability. Helen's laugh was bitter as burnt coffee. 12 years ago, Robert discovered Peterson's CFO was embezzling from pension funds. Instead of calling the FBI, he made a deal. We'd stay quiet. They'd stay loyal. She slid a manila folder across the table like a death warrant. Inside lay the complete documentation of Peterson Group's financial crimes, bank records, emails, audit reports spanning over a decade. Robert built a dead man switch. If key employees were ever fired without cause, or if the company faced collapse, this evidence would automatically go to the FBI, SEC, and every business reporter in America. Marcus stared at the documents, understanding dawning like a terrible sunrise. "You want to destroy the Peterson Group. I want to honor Robert's safeguards. Ethan thinks firing good people makes him smart. He's about to learn what smart really looks like." What Helen didn't tell Marcus was that she'd already made contact with 3 other fired employees who had their own reasons for revenge. James Winters, the former legal head, had discovered Ethan's plans to sell company assets to shell corporations he controlled. Sarah Mitchell from accounting had uncovered discrepancies in executive expense reports that bordered on fraud. And Tom Bradley from IT had documentation of security breaches that Ethan had ignored to save money. Each of them held pieces of a larger puzzle that would paint a devastating picture of corporate misconduct. Helen was simply the conductor of this orchestra of vengeance. The trap was elegant in its simplicity, and Ethan was walking straight into it. Ethan Hartwell had never felt more brilliant. His brutal cost-cutting had slashed payroll by 42%. Quarterly reports showed gleaming profit margins that finally earned him grudging respect from the board. He was a corporate gladiator, victorious in the arena of modern business. His success had caught the attention of more than just board members. Ashley, his girlfriend, was suddenly much more affectionate now that his bank account reflected his new status. Business magazines were calling for interviews. Headhunters whispered about even bigger opportunities. But success had made him careless. He'd been so focused on impressing the board that he'd ignored warning signs his fired employees might have spotted immediately. Server crashes that lasted hours instead of minutes. Client complaints that went unanswered because there was nobody left to handle them. Financial irregularities that Marcus Chun would have caught in his sleep. He handled the Peterson Group presentation personally. Why keep redundant employees when he could do it himself? The meeting seemed to go smoothly, though the Peterson executives appeared oddly subdued. Ethan attributed their mood to awe at his obvious competence. What he didn't see were the concerned glances Peterson's team exchanged. His presentation lacked the deep operational knowledge they'd come to expect. Worse, he'd made several factual errors that someone with Marcus's experience would never have committed. More troubling was what he'd accidentally revealed. In his eagerness to impress, Ethan had shared internal projections that showed Hartwell's true financial position, far weaker than anyone at Peterson realized. Without their contract, Hartwell Industries would be in serious trouble. When Peterson Group requested an urgent afternoon meeting, Ethan waved dismissively. "Tell them I'm busy. We have them locked in. They're not going anywhere." But 20 miles away, Peterson Group's CFO Janet Morrison was having a very different conversation with her legal team. "Find me every way out of this contract. Their service has collapsed, and I won't be held hostage by some piece of paper." Janet had no idea that her predecessor hadn't just signed a contract. He'd signed a confession. Meanwhile, Ethan was about to face another crisis he hadn't anticipated. The State Labor Board had received anonymous complaints about the mass layoffs, complete with documentation suggesting the firings might have violated employment laws. An investigation was already underway, and subpoenas would start arriving within days. Marcus's call came at midnight, his voice tight with urgency. "Helen, Peterson Group is asking questions. Specific questions about contract termination." Helen smiled in the darkness of her apartment. "Perfect. How fast can you get their current financials?" "Helen, if Peterson walks away, the company dies." "The company's already dead, Marcus. Ethan killed it when he fired everyone who knew how to run it. The only question is whether he goes down with the ship or sails away rich, while everyone else drowns." Over the following days, Helen orchestrated chaos with surgical precision. Every system error went unfixed. Every client complaint was ignored. Every deadline slipped past like sand through fingers. She documented each failure, building an ironclad case that Ethan's leadership was catastrophically incompetent. But she wasn't working alone. Tom Bradley, the fired IT director, had left behind more than just error messages. He'd programmed subtle glitches into the company's financial software, nothing that would cause permanent damage, but enough to make the quarterly reports look inconsistent. When auditors eventually reviewed the books, they'd find discrepancies that would take months to untangle. James Winters was feeding information to the Labor Board investigators, providing them with internal memos that showed Ethan had planned the layoffs weeks before conducting any performance reviews. Sarah Mitchell was quietly contacting former clients, letting slip that Hartwell's service quality had declined dramatically since the layoffs. Each action was small and deniable, but together they created a perfect storm of corporate disaster. The investigation expanded when a whistleblower contacted the local business journal with evidence of Ethan's asset transfers. The reporter, Lisa Chin, Marcus's younger sister, was particularly motivated to dig deep into the story. More than that, Helen was triggering the exact conditions Robert had built into his dead man's switch. The trap was armed and ready. All they needed now was for their target to take one more step. Thursday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. The conference room felt like a courtroom as Janet Morrison sat across from Ethan, flanked by lawyers and an accountant. Her expression promised no mercy. "Peterson Group is terminating our contract, effective immediately." Ethan's laughter echoed off the walls. "Janet, you can't just break a contract because you're having a bad day. We have specific terms. Terms signed under fraud." Janet slid a folder across the table like a weapon. "By a CFO who was stealing from pension funds." Crimes your father discovered and chose to exploit rather than report. Ethan's smile died. That's impossible. Bank records, emails, audit reports. Your father was a criminal, Mr. Hartwell. And if you honor this extortion contract, so are you. The world tilted beneath Ethan's feet. Without Peterson Group, Hartwell Industries would lose 30% of its revenue overnight. Combined with his gutted workforce, survival was impossible. You can't prove any of this. Janet's smile was winter incarnate. The evidence was delivered anonymously 2 days ago. Copies went to the FBI, SEC, and Wall Street Journal simultaneously. Someone who understood the difference between loyalty and complicity made sure your father's sins didn't have to become yours, unless you chose otherwise. What Janet didn't mention was that Peterson Group had their own reasons for moving quickly. They'd already signed preliminary agreements with Hartwell's main competitors, companies that had hired many of Ethan's fired employees. Marcus Chun was now working for Henderson and Associates, and he'd been very helpful in explaining Hartwell's weaknesses to his new employers. The dominoes were falling faster than Ethan could count them. By 5 p.m., Ethan's world was ending in real time. Headlines blazed across every business website. Hartwell Industries, decades of blackmail exposed. The company's stock price didn't just fall, it collapsed into a crater of its own making. Board members demanded emergency meetings. FBI agents opened investigations. Class action lawyers circled like vultures. But the worst was yet to come. Ashley, his girlfriend, had vanished along with several expensive pieces of jewelry he'd given her. His apartment landlord was demanding immediate payment of back rent. His credit cards were mysteriously canceled. Even his country club membership was under review. Helen Rodriguez entered his office without knocking, no longer the meek HR director he dismissed for weeks. This was someone who'd just won a war. She placed her resignation letter on his desk with ceremony, befitting a declaration of independence. This was never about my job, Ethan. This was about 40 good people who trusted that hard work meant job security. This was about Marcus Chun, who built 12 years of expertise you discarded in 5 minutes. You orchestrated all of this, Ethan said, the pieces finally falling into place. Helen's smile was sharp as broken glass. I honored your father's wishes. He built safeguards to protect this company from exactly the kind of leadership you represent. You triggered every single one of them. You've destroyed everything. Helen paused at the door, her voice carrying the finality of judgment. The company died the moment you decided loyalty was worthless. I just made sure the poison didn't spread. As she left, Ethan frantically began making phone calls. His lawyer wasn't returning calls. His accountant had mysteriously developed scheduling conflicts. Even his trusted assistant had submitted her resignation that morning. He was alone, exactly as he'd left 40 good people just weeks before. The board's Monday morning vote was unanimous. Ethan Hartwell was out. The FBI investigation expanded daily. The SEC reviewed every contract from the past 15 years. Legal fees mounted faster than anyone could count. The company's stock became worthless paper. The media coverage was brutal and unrelenting. Business schools were already preparing case studies. Former employees were giving interviews about their experiences. Even Miguel, the night janitor, had found his voice, describing the mysterious visitors and document thefts he'd witnessed in Ethan's final weeks. In his hospital bed, old Robert Hartwell watched his life's work crumble on the evening news. When Ethan visited for their final conversation, the dying man's words carried more strength than his voice had held in months. Helen Rodriguez was right, son. You never understood that business is about people. And now it's too late to learn. Robert passed away 3 days later, taking his secrets to the grave. But his final act of defiance lived on in the legal documents that continued to surface, each one revealing another layer of Ethan's incompetence and greed. The funeral was well attended by former employees who remembered the man Robert had been before illness and age had clouded his judgment. Ethan stood alone at the graveside, abandoned by fair-weather friends and opportunistic lovers. 6 months later, the former employees of Hartwell Industries had scattered across the corporate landscape like seeds on fertile ground. Marcus Chen earned more at Henderson and Associates than he ever had before, his expertise finally valued properly. Sarah Mitchell found meaningful work helping families with disabled children. The others landed in companies that appreciated experience over algorithms. Helen Rodriguez took a position with the city's Economic Development Office, helping small businesses avoid the mistakes that had destroyed Hartwell. She also quietly consulted with former colleagues launching their own companies, sharing lessons about building businesses on trust rather than terror. Tom Bradley started his own IT consulting firm, specializing in data security. His first major client was Peterson Group, who hired him to audit their systems after the Hartwell scandal. James Winters opened a boutique law practice focusing on employment rights and whistleblower protection. Even Miguel Santos had found new opportunity. His story about witnessing corporate espionage had caught the attention of a security firm that offered him a supervisor position with double his previous salary. Ethan Hartwell had fled to Los Angeles, working for a startup whose founders hadn't bothered Googling his name. Helen gave it 6 months before they discovered who they'd really hired. But the most important victory wasn't Ethan's downfall. It was the message she'd sent to every other entitled executive who might think employees were disposable. Some lessons could only be taught through devastating consequences. The ripple effects continued to spread. 3 other companies in the city reviewed their layoff policies after seeing Hartwell's fate. Business schools began teaching courses on employee retention and corporate ethics. The state legislature even passed new protections for workers facing mass layoffs. 1 year after the collapse, Helen received an unexpected visitor at her new office. Lisa Chin, the business reporter who'd broken the Hartwell story, sat across from her desk with a knowing smile. "I have a question about the timeline," Lisa said, pulling out a thick folder. The anonymous tip about Peterson Group's crimes. It arrived exactly 24 hours after Ethan fired your team. Almost like someone was waiting for a specific trigger. Helen's expression remained neutral, but her hand stilled on her coffee cup. "Here's what I think happened," Lisa continued. "Robert Hartwell didn't just create a dead man's switch for Peterson Group. He created one for his own son. He knew Ethan would eventually take over, and he knew what kind of leader Ethan would become. So he set up safeguards to protect his employees from his own flesh and blood." The reporter leaned forward. "You weren't just following Robert's instructions. You were the instruction. You were his designated executioner, waiting in the wings for the day his son proved unworthy of the crown." Helen finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Robert Hartwell built a great company by treating people well. When he got sick, he worried about what would happen to his life's work. He asked me to make sure it would be protected." "Even from his own son?" "Especially from his own son." Lisa nodded and closed her folder. "Don't worry. This conversation stays between us. But I wanted you to know that someone understands what you really did. You didn't destroy a company. You performed a mercy killing." After Lisa left, Helen sat alone in her office, thinking about the weight of loyalty and the price of justice. Sometimes protecting people meant making impossible choices. Sometimes saving a company meant destroying it first. She had no regrets. Helen kept one photograph on her new desk, the final Hartwell Industries holiday party, 43 people smiling confidently before their world ended. They deserved better than Ethan's casual cruelty. In the end, she'd given them something more valuable than job security. She'd given them justice. Sometimes she wondered if destroying the company had been right. The collateral damage was real, affecting innocent people along with the guilty. But then she'd remember Marcus's bewildered face at the turnstile, Sarah's tears in the parking lot, the decades of dedication discarded like yesterday's newspaper. Those people had trusted her to protect them. She hadn't saved their jobs, but she'd done something better. She'd made sure their destroyer faced consequences. 2 years later, business schools taught the Hartwell Industries case study as a cautionary tale about treating employees like disposable assets. What the textbooks couldn't capture was the human cost of corporate arrogance, or Helen's quiet satisfaction when Ethan's subsequent ventures failed. The Los Angeles startup had indeed fired him after 6 months, once they discovered his history. His next job lasted 3 months. The one after that, 6 weeks. Word traveled fast in business circles, especially when former employees were eager to share their experiences. Last Helen heard, Ethan was working at a car dealership in Phoenix, trying to rebuild his life far from the corporate world he'd once believed he could conquer. Ashley had married a tech entrepreneur and moved to Silicon Valley, never looking back. Some people are destined to keep learning painful lessons until someone decides they've heard enough innocence. The CEO's son had taken over, fired everyone, and convinced himself he was a genius. He'd been wrong about everything except one thing: numbers don't lie. Helen Rodriguez had simply made sure he learned what the real numbers were and what they cost when you ignore them too long. In the end, loyalty had proven more powerful than arrogance. Experience had triumphed over entitlement. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really do win, even if they have to burn everything down to do it. The greatest victory wasn't Ethan's destruction. It was the 43 lives that had found new purpose, new respect, and new hope. They'd been discarded like broken tools, but they'd proven to be diamonds in the rough, valuable beyond measure to employers who recognized their worth. Helen's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Daughter got into MIT. Thank you for everything. She smiled and typed back. You earned it. All of it. Outside her window, the city hummed with the energy of people building their dreams. Somewhere among them were the former employees of Hartwell Industries, creating new success stories from the ashes of the old. Justice, Helen had learned, wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was about making sure good people got the second chances they deserved. And sometimes, when the world seemed determined to reward cruelty over kindness, it took someone willing to light a match to make sure the right values survived. The fire had burned hot and bright. From its ashes, better things had grown. That was enough. If you liked this story, give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more shocking tales. Click the box on the left. Your next adventure is waiting.